All right, so now we're going to use a piece of artwork from Mike Stone. He is at Pixel Xaos, and he wanted to start. He started with this image, and he wanted to turn it into a blue background color. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do that. There's also a couple of different shades of blue. You might even do a gradient. This one is a little bit of a gradient. But the basic idea is that there are actually a couple of different ways to do that. So let's take a look at the using a selection mask. And it's easy. Once you have a selection mask, you can see the marching ants and so on. But how do we get to that in the first place? So I'm going to clear that and simply select the color I want to select or not select. Right? You can always think outside the box and say, well, if I want to select a color, but everything else is a different color, I could choose that other color and then invert the selection. So I'm going to choose black here, select by color key, and you simply pick one of these black colors and that does the job. For the most part, there is a little bit of tolerance you might want to adjust and play with. Make sure you set it either to RGB or hue saturation value, or in this case, as dark as possible is the value. So let's go for black. V for the V difference, value difference. And that basically selects all the pixels that are that particular color, and close enough. Now, you may have some very fine details, and so you're going to be careful about how much tolerance you give it. Once you have that, though, if it's a good selection mask, you see up here there's a couple of marching ants, there's a couple of little blinkety things here. So it's not a perfect black on all these pixels, and therefore they didn't get selected all the same. So one thing you would do also is use the rectangle tool, and with the right button, with left button, add to that selection. Right button would remove from the selection, left button with the shift key. You gotta use the shift key here, and add to that selection. I think the rest is fine. We can, just in case, we can add a little bit more than here in these corners. So once you've selected a fairly good number of pixels that should be selected, first of all, you want to store the selection. That's one place you can do that. There's also just store the image that will also store the alpha channel, which is where the selection lives. And so now, that being the selected pixels, the black ones, you can replace them with blue in a couple of ways. If it were a simple closed object, you would just click with the fill tool and maybe make the left button here, the left color, bluish, and pick here. But that's not going to work always, and there are some parts that are not selected, and there are some parts that are on the inside and they're not selected. So that's not really perfect either. What I'm going to do instead is a gradient, or you could use the fill tool, not the fill tool, but the rectangle fill tool, and go all across the entire image. So that's kind of a brute force approach. Let's go with the rectangle tool. Lower right, upper left is just the outline of the rectangle. Lower right is filling it. And of course, that's filling it with the fill tool. So you got to have that one right too. But you saw here, let me do that again, slow-mo. It's just filling it, and that's it, going through the mask, leaving the rest alone. The ones that are not selected are not changing color. And then that's it. You can deselect, and you have pretty much achieved that. Now, let's store this. Let's undo and go back to this. Instead of a plain color, you might be interested in a gradient. So go here. Select the gradients. There's a couple of linear or circular gradients. There's a couple of presets here. So there's many different ways to fill it, right? It doesn't have to be a uniform color. And also you could, for example, use this tool here, the adjustable gradient, and say, let's go from here to here. And the first color, click it and say that's going to be blue. And then the second color, click that one on the other end, and that's going to be blue too, maybe the same blue, right? And you could have some other colors in between. Maybe click here and say that one's going to be kind of a light green. So you have many different ways to actually produce a color through that selection mask. Now let's go take a look at one or two more options. One that really comes to mind is when you use two images. You might think of layers. That's not necessarily it, though, but it's kind of similar. So without the selection mask, if you start with something like this, and then you say all these black pixels should turn blue, what if you put that blue in a separate layer, and in fact in the swap buffer? You switch around. I have it already here. Maybe I put a slightly different blue. But what I'm going to do now is say, well, show me the blue unless there is something brighter. And you could combine that in the filters. You can do combine with swap. There's a couple of choices here. Go experiment with that. But certainly also this one here, composite with swap. Color key. And you just select the blue color. And whatever is blue is becoming transparent. And then it's showing the stuff behind it. But wait, hold on. We wanted to keep it blue here. That's black now. So that's not it. We need to evidently go something a little bit. Maybe we switch around. So let's go switch around, have it here, and then blue is in the back. So we select the black, and that's going to turn transparent. We're going to see the blue behind it. The rest is not going to turn blue. Let's go do that. So filter, composite, color key. You could actually try the blue screen here, but that's not the same result. Let's do this. Composite with swap, color key, and select the black. There you go. Now the black pixels are selected and automatically pull the blue color from the background. So that could be any picture, right? What you have here in the background in the swap image could be any picture, any gradient, any photograph, whatever you want there in the back. But that's going to show through because you pick the colors. If you pick one of those little white areas, you see that turning blue. But the black pixels is what you want to select. You see the key color here. You can actually select it here too. You can do, you can select that in different ways. And then there's a bit of tolerancing, high filter, and so on. You can also see the matte, the selection, and it's important to see here whether it's very fine. It's giving you very fine details, and that's good. So that's it, and you're done. Now there's one more. For those who think in layers, you can also do the following. You can put this in as the first layer down here. That's on the sidebar. You might not see it unless you expand it, and it may be on the left side by default. So the selection is here. I mean, the initial image is here, and now I'm going to add another layer. And in that layer, I'm going to put the blue. So I'm going to fill it with blue. Now, the two are combined. It's not replacing each other, but you can combine it in different ways. And here you get a real-time preview of what happens if you switch these, right? So you might find that maybe this one here, the screen mode, might be interesting. It's not exactly the same color. The original is a little bit darker yellow here. And the white is a little bit brighter now. So there are some slight changes. Maybe this one is good. That's greater than. So when the colors are greater in the background, it pulls it forward, right? And so that's going to look pretty good too. Maybe the blue screen might not be there, but there's a couple of other effects you might discover here. That's also interesting. I'm going to go with this one. And that's it. So we've seen a couple of ways to combine those, and of course the quality of that will depend a lot on how high a resolution your image is, how fine the details can be, and also if you have a JPEG compression. So make sure you don't use JPEG and then do that kind of work. Make sure you save a lossless version like PNG or Targa, TIFF, BMP. These formats should not be lossy. Here we're having a little bit of a noisy situation, and the transition, that's going to be probably not visible at this level of zoom, but it depends on what you're going to do, whether you're going to print it or use it in the end. Now, once you've combined those two layers, you still have these two layers, right? And by the way, you can also adjust the level of that opacity here, the layer. So you could say, well, I don't need it this bright blue, maybe a little bit darker. You can adjust that. And once you have it the way you like it, what you could do is simply flatten that. It doesn't matter which layer you've selected, you just flatten the whole stack of layers, and you're back to a single one layer image. And there it is. So yeah, thanks for watching. I hope it's going to be useful if you do something similar. And maybe you'd like to also have a quick look at Mike Stone's website. Some of the artwork he does is quite impressive. He is based in Chicago. Look him up.